360 degrees. High, 360 degrees. High, 306, 306, 360 degrees. High, round and round we go. To the circle, 360. Round and round we go. Life was
All right, Miyuyam, Cho Onam, and Mokium to Full Circle, your cultural affairs radio magazine, produced by members and graduates of the First Voice Apprenticeship Program, broadcasting from right here at KPFA in Huichin, occupied Ohlone Territory, also known to settlers as Berkeley, California. And this week on Full Circle, we'll get an update on the case of the Golden Gate 26. They are the protesters that occupied the Golden Gate Bridge on tax day in 2024 to protest our tax dollars being used to fund genocide in Gaza. A group of 7 of the protesters had closing arguments in their trial today, and the jury is out. We'll be getting an update. And in the second half of the show, the DMV is seeking $54 million to share driver's license data with a third-party data management company that critics say will open up millions of drivers' personal information to the feds in the Trump regime, including ICE. Can it be stopped? We'll find out. That's tonight on Full Circle. I'm your host tonight, Free Will and Franklin. I'm coming to you from downtown Antioch. This is occupied Bay Miwok territory. Keep it locked right here to KPFA. All right, Free Will and Franklin here, Notion Lovick. My heart is good. Thanks for joining us tonight on Full Circle right here on KPFA Radio. And to kick off the show tonight, I want to get an update on the case of the Golden Gate 26, which had closing arguments. I believe it was today or yesterday. And the Golden Gate case, the Golden Gate 26 case, stems from a protest that took place on April 15th, tax day 2024. And in the morning, 26 anti-genocide, I guess I would say, protesters took to the Golden Gate Bridge and stopped traffic on the bridge. And it lasted a number of hours. Individuals were getting a lot of charges thrown at them. And we have one of the Golden Gate 26 on the line here to give us an update now that the case, the court case has reached closing arguments, and what were some of the highlights that happened throughout this case, because a lot of things happened that were, I don't want to say unique, but that were very interesting in this case. So let me welcome Ray Khan, and Ray was one of the people on the bridge that day. Welcome to Full Circle. Welcome to KPFA, Ray.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, first, this protest that we just talked about, the Golden Gate 26, the shutdown of the Golden Gate Bridge on April 15th, came just about 7 to 8 months into this genocide that is happening in Gaza. And it's seen its way through the court system, as I mentioned, and is starting to wrap up for some folks. And I want you to help us catch up on what has happened. Can you first kick it off and tell us on that day what you all did, and then kind of just tell us what the court has charged you all with in broader terms as a group when it first started?
Sure. So on that day, we all were on that bridge, taking a bold action, trying to get the eyes of our elected officials to try to stop the U.S. from funding this ongoing genocide in Gaza. And We shut down traffic for about 4 hours, trying to get this a message across because at that point of time, as you mentioned, it had been about 8 months, and we had tried, and as we heard from the 7 defendants during their beautiful testimonies earlier this week, they had tried everything in their power, uh, trying to get their message across to their elected officials. They wrote, they called their Congress people, they marched in the streets, they held postcard writing events, and nothing was working. The government wasn't listening, and this genocide was continuing. And so they and myself decided to take a bold and brave act of civil disobedience because civil disobedience is both effective and necessary when the government isn't listening to the voices of the people. And the government wasn't listening to the voices of the people. So um, taking this brave act on the Golden Gate Bridge, which is iconic here in the Bay Area, holds a lot of symbolic meaning. There has been a rich history of protests on the Golden Gate Bridge that are actually promoted on the Golden Gate Bridge website itself, ironically. Um, and this is the first time in the history of the Bay Area in 35 years that we have seen this kind of over prosecution, these kind of unprecedented charges for an act of civil disobedience like we did on tax day in 2024.
Can you just
Um,
elaborate on what the charges were? They were pretty extreme for some
yes,
folks.
they were very extreme. So the 7 of the 26 are currently facing felony conspiracy charges and false imprisonment charges, which hold a maximum of 14 to 15 years in prison.
And also talk about real quick the unique call out. I think it was the Highway Patrol or the district attorney did seeking people to file complaints.
That's right. So, in another unprecedented fashion, the DA and CHP posted on social media, making a big call out to the Bay Area. If you were on the bridge that day and you got stuck in traffic, you may be a victim and allowed to receive restitution and money for being a victim. We've never seen that before. And we know, as people that live in the Bay Area, traffic accidents and that sort of thing happen all the time. And for the DA and CHP to put out such an explicit call to try to bring complaining witnesses forward, and try to over prosecute this case and try and charged us with false imprisonment, which was part of that tactic that they were using, and that's what we're seeing here. And yeah, it was part of their over prosecution of trying to single out those, well, all of us, but especially these 7 that are being hit with the felony conspiracy charges as well.
So let's keep on that right now. So there was 26 to start. Some things different happened to others we won't get into yet, except for we'll talk about your case a little bit in a moment. But the 7 that are still going through this, that are wrapping up right now, face the most serious charges. Did those charges actually stick throughout the case? Are they still being charged with false imprisonment and conspiracy?
They are still being charged with false imprisonment and conspiracy. Throughout the case, we've seen many of the false imprisonment charges get dropped. There still are 4 remaining, I believe. But we saw prosecution bring in some of these complaining witnesses that came forward with a testimony, and there was clearly a bias with some of them being upset with the message and why we were there that day. And in my opinion, we were kind of seeing some of their evidence in that fall apart a little bit. But yes, those 7 are still being charged with false conspiracy and a handful of the false imprisonment, as well as a couple others trespassing, trying to interfere with a business and things like that.
All right, well, let's move on a little bit because, as I've been kind of alluding to, it's wrapping up and folks gave some final testimony and closing arguments this past couple of days. Talk about some of the highlights that we spoke about before we got on the mic here, including the opportunity and the I don't even know what word to use. I'm not a big court person, but that the defendants here were able to use the word genocide and also were allowed to wear keffiyehs in the courtroom. And we say this because in a lot of cases involving Palestine and what we're seeing in Gaza, folks aren't allowed to use the word genocide and other more harsh terms to describe why they're taking this bold action. So why don't you start there with those two, and then tell us about any other I don't like using the term, but quote unquote highlights of the case that have stood out.
Yeah, absolutely. So the government and the prosecution filed a couple of motions trying to ban the wearing of keffiyehs in the courtroom and trying to ban the use of the word genocide in the courtroom as well. Luckily, both of these were denied. Um, However, we saw that the wording in one of these motions was almost verbatim what the Stanford 11, what the prosecution in the Stanford 11 case had brought forward with as well. So, taking a play out of the playbook, if you will.
Well, let me pause you there, because talk about the importance of being able to use the term genocide, because people might go out and march and protest for certain things, and they might hang out at a civic center and chant and disperse and go home because they're angry and frustrated with a government policy. It's a little bit different when they're angry and frustrated with a occurring genocide, and to really block traffic on a major artery such as a historic landmark as the Golden Gate Bridge. So just tell me what it was like, and kind of the feeling of being able to use this terminology that we use on a regular basis, that we are seeing with our own eyes.
Absolutely. You know, it's so obvious that this case is politically motivated. It's so obvious this case is over prosecuted. And because we haven't seen this kind of prosecution in a case like this. And I mean, this is a perfect example of the Palestine exception to to free speech and to dissenting, and the fact that this was the protest that the DA decided to target. And we saw, when that motion was brought forward. Okay, so let me maybe actually fast forward for a moment. The use of the word genocide in this trial has been so important. The defendants testifying in this case centering their intent. So the prosecution was trying to focus on the 4 hours that uh, the protests happened and traffic was stopped on the bridge, kind of forgetting about the fact that intent really matters here, and the laws. Uh, Intent is important for the law, it's important for the jurors, and it was extremely important for the defendants for why they were on the bridge that day. And so they were able to bring in through absolutely beautiful, tear jerking testimony that why they were there. They were there because they had tried everything in their power to get their electeds to listen, and they were witnessing live stream this genocide in Gaza. They were witnessing hospitals being bombed, children starving. There was a retelling of a story of a 92-year-old grandma who was left behind, and then when the family returned back to her after the IOF had kidnapped the family, that her body was burnt lying in a bed. And this was coming from one of the defendants that is the sole caretaker for his mom who has a disability. I don't think there was a dry eye in the audience during that testimony. So us being allowed to, and the defendants being allowed, and the lawyers being allowed to use the word genocide, to wear their keffiyehs wrapped around their bodies during this whole trial, was so crucial in bringing the focus back to Palestine, back to this ongoing genocide that has not ended, recentering Palestine, describing why they were on the bridge that day and their intent and why they decided to take that bold action.
Wow, thank you for that explanation, because that was going to be kind of part of my follow up question was what it was like in the courtroom, and I could imagine being able to share that personal motivation, and being able to share, like you said, the context kind of matters. You know, the why they were out there that day, and not being able to trying to limit a word like genocide, trying to limit certain terms, really is kind of a play to not let them share those personal stories, to not let them share that. And it kind of leads me into, well, I wanted to ask your personal motivations, but I'm kind of curious as well, like the legal strategy as best as you could explain it, maybe not being a lawyer, but like in our terms, in regular folks' terms, kind of drawing on that ability to be able to share what they've been witnessing, what they've sit down and watched, and what drove them, and you, of course, to get out there. Tell us more about that kind of strategy to be able to share those personal motivations and how important that was.
Yeah, so one of the legal strategies that in the long run unfortunately didn't work because the necessity defense was denied, but um, the idea behind the necessity defense, which is an affirmative defense, is when the defendants bring forward, we uh, we were acting out of necessity to prevent a greater harm than happening that was already happening. There was a genocide. There is still a genocide happening in Gaza, and we have to get the attention of our elected officials so they can stop funding this ongoing genocide. And how can we do that? And what is our intent behind that? And how do we get the attention of these elected officials? So the necessity defense. So what we saw in court was that they were trying to again, through these like this beautiful weaving of stories of their testimonies, talking about what they were seeing and live streaming the genocide in Gaza every day and why they took action, but trying to show to the jurors and to the judge, we were trying to prevent a greater harm from happening. Stopping traffic on the bridge is not a greater harm than an ongoing genocide in Gaza. Um, Unfortunately, that defense was denied by the judge, which prevented the legal team from being able to bring in more expert witnesses that were going to take the stand and testify to the genocide, and their expertise in a number of categories. However, I think the defendants did like a truly knock it out of the park job trying to get across why they were there through this weaving of stories of what they were witnessing in Gaza, day by day and week by week as this genocide raged on.
Wow, thank you for that. I'm sorry I couldn't make it out and see some of that, but just being in the courtroom to see things like this is it's just got to be amazing, amazing to see. And I'm so glad that they were able to put that forward into the record. Let me lead that into getting you to share your personal motivations. I'm assuming they're very much similar to the broader motivations you just shared, but talk about your own experience because, as I mentioned, folks might get up in March because something's happening that they don't agree with. That could be like potholes in town, for an example, or even more broader government policy. But going against an active genocide, kind of leaves you, as you said, with little options if no one's listening. So, talk about your personal motivations and what led you to be on the bridge that day.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Jewish. I was raised Jewish, and I think, like many Jews, I was raised with um, a a deep education and understanding of the Holocaust and the phrase "never again." Okay, how do we prevent another genocide happening to another people? So as a Jewish person, as an anti-Zionist Jew, as a person simply with a beating heart who cares about other people with beating hearts, I, similar to my co-defendants, was like, enough is enough. I had similarly tried to I had written postcards. I had called my Congress people. I had also been in the streets with some of my comrades, and nothing was working. And so I similarly was like, okay, it's time to escalate things a little bit more. It's time to try to really get the attention of our elected so we can stop this funding and this money from going to the genocide. So it was uh, something that I had learned, I mean, since as far back as I can remember, through Sunday school and through, just my Jewish and spiritual and religious practices. Um, and so seeing the atrocities happen, these atrocities and these massacres being carried out against the Palestinian people, quote unquote, in my name as a Jewish person, that's abhorrent. So yeah, it was time to escalate and take action.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And you kind of already said it in your answer to that question that you are an anti Zionist Jew. But let me get your thoughts as a Jewish person, because we have a lot of these laws or legislation trying to connect anti Semitism to the criticism of Israel or Zionism. Let me just get your thoughts on that as a Jewish person. How do you relate anti Semitism to criticizing Israel and Zionism? And how do you separate those things as a Jewish person?
These things feel so clear for me to separate. The Zionist entity and Israel being this settler colonial state that is trying to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people, um, that is occupying that land, that is massacring and has been massacring the Palestinians for so long. that is that is not Judaism, that is Zionism, that is racism, that is hatred. And that's not what me as a Jewish person and an anti-Zionist Jew, that's not what we stand for. And unfortunately, Israel's propaganda of waging this war is conflating the two is, yeah, it's it's not good. And we need to be, I am in the start, especially um, closer to the beginning of this genocide, was really trying to engage with some of my Jewish and Zionist um family members and loved ones around me, and continuing to educate people that these two are not the same is so important. And that is the work of anti Zionist Jews such as myself. We've got our work cut out for us, but I'm here for it.
Definitely, definitely. Well, again, that's the voice of Ray Khan. Ray was on the Golden Gate Bridge back in April of 2024, and is one of the Golden Gate 26. Do you want to give folks a little update on, how you are personally doing, knowing that you have separated your case from the 7 that are on trial right now? How are you doing?
Yeah, so right now my case is currently being diverted. So I was offered a diversion deal, unlike my 7 co-defendants who were not offered that deal or anything close to that deal. Um, so my case will come to completion on June 15th. And we currently, in fact, I am in the halls right now of the courthouse as the jury deliberates. And we pray that they will come back with a not guilty verdict on everything, and that my comrades and my friends will walk free. So, yes, hopefully we will all be done with this very soon. And I feel hopeful the people of San Francisco will see through this politically targeted case and the over prosecution of this case. And I feel hopeful that they'll deliver a not guilty verdict on all counts.
Definitely. And Ray, how can folks keep up and follow information about this? And are you all expecting a verdict today? You think they'll go home today with a verdict?
I would be surprised if a verdict came back today. I think it's looking more likely that will happen beginning of next week, but we shall see. And then folks can follow us on Instagram at GG26 Solidarity. And then I want to give a shout out for folks to also follow the Oakland arms embargo and to get involved, trying to stop the selling of the continue selling of arms and shipping of those arms directly to Israel, which is the only reason this genocide continues. So get involved in that as well if you can. Yeah, and thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate it. Again, that's Raycon, one of the Golden Gate 26. Closing arguments were held today. And just for the record, we're recording this interview. It's a little bit after 1 p.m. So the jury is deliberating, and we'll try to get an update next week or in the morning if it happens today. Otherwise, we'll stay in touch, Ray, and we'll keep the station updated and the world, of course, updated next week. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
In our lifetime, we will be free. One day when the light shines, we will be free. In our lifetime, we will be free. And they can bury us, but they will find out we are seeds. I say free Palestine because I know of every massacre we suffered. The Nakba, Sabra, Shatila, and Rafah. My people have died 1,000,000 times in the struggle. Still they rise from the tide like a rose through the rubble. I see God himself in the eye of a refugee who'd rather die a martyr than live a life under siege. So if I'm not allowed to say from the river to the sea, then from the Rhine to the sea, Palestine will be free. Still they know they can't shake us. $1 billion sword to the neck. Death cannot break us. And every Palestinian refugee holds a key. One day we will return, no matter how long it takes us. In our lifetime, we will be free. One day when the light shines, we will be free. In our lifetime, we will be free. And they can bury us, but they will find out we are seeds.
I'm grateful to be alive. You appreciate life when you survive a genocide. Look in my eyes and tell me what you see. Ran out of tears to cry, right till Palestine is free. Got a problem with a system that doesn't want us exist and turn the city to a prison that's missing living conditions. My mom's calling, she's telling me she kinda scared. I hear the bombs falling, I smell of death up in the air. My uncle lost his children, I lost my cousins. His tears watered the grave to let him know we still love some. Our schools turn to shelters for the rich and poor. I just pray for peace when I speak, I don't wish for war. Bodies laying out, ain't nothing to play about. I give my people hope, cause I'm the first who made it out. I'm just walking the path, this is God's plan. Building up my dreams with the rubble I touch with my hands.
لو دفنونا نرجع مزهرين. They done woke up the world now. We know who you serve at the White House. To kids in Gaza, my bow right now. I'ma ride for your life like you are my child. Long live the resistance if there's something to resist. Had enough of you murdering little kids. PC for a minute, I was trying to be a bridge, but they'll never be freedom by pleading with Zionists. World screaming free Palestine. We see the manual, we know you colonized. You'd be surprised by how many you actually really don't give when you take away the power of the almighty dollar sign. Dear Lord, we'll boycott the stores. Capitalism killing us, that's something we can't afford. They want us to hate each other in the interest of war. Afraid of the mosque and afraid of like the menorah. Hey Kamala, I don't know if you listening, but stop sending money and weapons or you ain't winning Michigan. We uncommitted and hell no, we ain't switching positions because the whole world turned Palestinian. I see the murdered children of Gaza and I see my babies. Life being stripped from the bombs we're making. When will Congress decide a Palestinian's life is just as precious as an Israeli's? We don't own the earth, don't own the earth. We're killing each other over some lines in the dirt. We bleed the same blood, feel the same hurt. Palestinian life, does it have the same worth? What happened to us? What happened to us?
All right, Freewell and Franklin coming back at you here on Full Circle KPFA Radio. We are part of the Pacifica Radio Network. You could also find us on social media at First Voice Media. And right now we're going to turn back to a story here in California about the DMV because California is currently preparing to share DMV records through a third-party database system, potentially exposing sensitive personal information to federal agencies, including ICE and the Trump administration. And this plan puts all our data at risk, especially immigrants and trans people, and anyone who can be targeted because of their identity or because maybe they disagree with the administration. These shared data will include whether a driver has a social security number or not, which could be used to compile a bulk list of undocumented drivers and their addresses. And this data sharing would shatter California's decades-long promise to protect the personal information of more than 1 million immigrant drivers who received driver's license through the California DMV. Joining us to talk about the action that was held yesterday at DMV in San Francisco is Jane Martin of Bay Resistance. Welcome, Jane.
Hi, welcome. Thank you.
And also joining us is someone we've had on before, Arnie Johnson of Rainbow Families Action. Welcome back to the show, Arnie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're going to kick it off with just kind of going back to yesterday, which was the press conference that was held at the San Francisco DMV. I imagine there's probably a couple out there, being such a big city. But Jane, flash us back to yesterday and the press conference, and share with us what you see happening right now, because as far as my understanding is, we still have a chance to stop this. The data has not been shared yet.
Yeah, we absolutely do. So yesterday we had a really beautiful and powerful gathering. You know, we had immigrant families led by Mujeres Unidas y Activas, and queer and trans families and advocates led by Rainbow Families with Arnie and the Harvey Milk Democratic Club, joining together, you know, as some of the communities who've been most under attack from this horrific administration, federal administration, to support each other and to call upon California leaders to stand with us, right? To stand with Californians and not make our data vulnerable to this evil MAGA regime that's trying to oppress us. It was a great gathering. We took our message straight to the DMV. You know, the DMV has been trying to move forward with this move to share our data to comply with the Real ID requirements. But we're calling upon California leaders, the legislature, to really stand up to this, right? And not comply with this fascist federal government, and instead to protect our data and make sure that, you know, it doesn't make us vulnerable to the kind of targeted arrests that the immigrant community has been experiencing here in the Bay Area and, you know, accelerated under the Trump administration. California made a commitment to the immigrant community when they passed AB 60 and, you know, granted driver's licenses, that our data would not be weaponized against our community and used to separate our families. And we're calling on California to uphold that promise.
Yeah, before we go to Arnie, talk about that because California made a big deal that we were going to be helping folks by allowing immigrants to have driver's licenses, and they just had to apply, and this was going to be used in a safe manner. Talk about how this can be used to expose folks since they're trying to tie this to Social Security numbers.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you laid out, giving a nonprofit that this federal government has access to the list of everyone in California with their social security numbers or whether they have a social security number or not and their addresses is, would be a horrific move, right? And I want to be clear for people so we don't spread fear. That has not happened. We're going to fight it. We're going to come together as Californians and urge our leaders to do the right thing because they did make a commitment. They made a commitment. Allowing driver's license to be accessible to all our communities in California was to make our communities safer. And this would do the exact opposite if they betrayed the trust of the immigrant community and the trust of all Californians really by going back on their word. So we know that there are folks in the legislature in California who are very concerned about it now that it's come to light and are asking all the right questions. And, we're really going to continue to encourage our legislatures to stand up to this and make sure it doesn't happen.
Thank you for that, Jane Martin of Bay Resistance. Let me bring in Arnie now because another aspect of this is exposing folks who may identify as a trans person with the identity that they're most comfortable with, which may not always match the identity they were born at. And there's been a lot of action in the Trump administration of attacking the trans community, including on the passports where you would have to use your sex assigned at birth identity. So Arnie, welcome back to the show again. Talk about what this can mean for trans folks who have chose to pick the identity that they are comfortable with and that they express openly, and what that means if they can be outed through this data sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, for our families, we know that the danger of this is very real. So if you are a parent of a trans kid at this time, you are spending most of your waking hours fighting off the federal government's attempts to get the information and data about your child. There have been multiple subpoenas sent to hospitals and medical societies to try to get that information from those hospitals to find out personal secret details about your children, about their bodies, about their emotional states. And so we're really aware that the federal government wants information about our kids and our families, and that if we hand this data outside of California to a body that does not have an invested interest in protecting that data, this is a nonprofit based in Virginia, they'll be subject to subpoenas just like any other hospital system or anybody else. And there's nothing in place to defend that data except whether or not the nonprofit's lawyers decide that it's worth fighting, or if they have any alternatives to whatever data that the federal government wants to get from them. So California has an invested interest in defending its citizens. We are proud members of this community alongside the immigrants that Jane talked about that are having to face the same exact danger of having their information outside the bounds of the place that made the promise and commitment to keep that data private. And I want to just say one more thing about the very real danger of this situation for our families. In Kansas last year, some people may not know about this, but one of the first draconian laws that they passed against trans folks in their community was in fact targeted at driver's licenses, because they know that that's where they can find out where somebody has changed a gender marker, where they have changed their name. They use that driver's license data to ban transgender people from having a driver's license that did not match the sex that they were born with. And so overnight, literally a week later, people who were trans could not drive their cars anymore. Their driver's licenses were revoked. People lost their jobs. They couldn't get to the hospital. This is the kind of culture that we're talking about, that we're surrounded by, and these are the kinds of people that will be handling our data are the folks that are very interested in that data and also understand how to weaponize it against our communities.
Well, let me keep you on for another moment, Arnie, because the Trump administration 2.0 here has been really ramping up attacks on trans people and even trying to mark them as some sort of mental illness or even as domestic terrorists. They're really trying to keep a tab and to monitor these folks. Talk about the more broad attacks, because I feel like the immigrant community and the trans community are both being legally attacked and, of course, physically attacked. They're for different reasons, but they're seeking the same outcome: to monitor, to expel, and to punish. So, talk about the broader attacks of the Trump administration on trans people and how this adds into the total game of the Trump administration to find everybody who's trans, monitor them, and see what they could do about their lives.
This was part of the reason why our action yesterday was so beautiful. It was an amazing opportunity to stand side by side with our immigrant brothers and sisters and fight the same fight. At this point, the Trump administration has decided that the tip of the spear of their attempt to take over this entire country are undocumented immigrants and trans people. And I think there's no mistake as to why this is happening. As somebody else pointed out at the Action Honey Mahogany, who's an incredible trans leader in our community, pointed out that when Nazi Germany began, we hear a lot about, of course, we know about the attacks on Jews and gypsies, but also they spent a lot of energy early on in their attacks and their attempts to build fascism going after immigrants and trans and gay people. And so we're really aware right now, and I think we need more opportunities for the trans community and the immigrant community to stand together, because the fight is the same. They want to eliminate and erase us. I'm sorry, I just get a little choked up about this, but they're trying to erase our children and immigrant families off the face of the earth. And California is built on immigrants, and it's built on queer people. A lot of the money that comes into this state, a lot of the value, a lot of the culture is built in those communities. There would be no California without queer communities and immigrant communities. And they can't be erased without erasing California. And so it's important for us to be together and fight the erasure of our communities, because it will hurt everybody, not just our communities.
Definitely. And that would not be a California I would want to be a part of if you were all not part of it. Let me kind of bring that same question and get some comments from you, Jane Martin, because as I mentioned, both the immigrant community and the trans community are under these physical and legal attacks to, in your case, the immigrants which you're representing here are in danger of like long prison sentences as they await possible deportation to who knows where. You could end up in an African country. But talk about the broader fight against immigrants right now, which we've all been witnessing, and we're seeing the hunger strikers at the concentration camps. But talk about how this DMV tactic is playing into the broader picture here, Jane.
Well, yeah, I think the attacks that we've already seen in the Bay Area on our immigrant communities have been these targeted arrests. So sharing data and making it accessible to the federal government of people's home addresses will only accelerate that process. They're already going after people who are in the asylum process, seeking their legal residency because they have their addresses, and this would just give thousands and thousands and thousands of more addresses accessible to this horrific regime. But it is incredibly encouraging, like you said, of the amazing actions by the hunger strikers within detention and the community coming together across the Bay Area. We've been fighting the expansion of detention facilities that they want to open in Dublin. Now there's a new threat of a potential piece of land in Gilroy that's being, controlled by the Department of Homeland Security. But the Bay Area and California, we're united that This is not what we want here. We support all of our communities. The climate of fear that people have been living with is just horrible, right? But people are coming together and saying, it's not what we want. It's not what we want in California. We know that California needs to stand up to this. And, certainly our governor, if he, wants to run for president and talk about what he's done in contrast it with the horrific acts of this regime, it needs to include protecting the data of Californians and standing up for immigrant community and the trans community.
Definitely well said. And we'll stick with Jane Martin. What got you to join this cause, this fight? What are your personal motivations to bring you to someone that takes action?
Well, in this case, I'm just worried about, my friends and family, like so many people are, being kidnapped and taken away from their families and their life and the decades of hard work that they've done in this country, and they deserve to be able to be a part of our community, right? So that's what's motivating me, as well as, my wanting to stand with my trans siblings and their children. And I know, how much pressure people have been on ever since this Trump was reelected, and we've got to stand together, and we can, right? We can fight off this attack, and we'll fight off other attacks together.
For sure. That's the voice of Jane Martin of Bay Resistance, and we're also joined by Arnie Johnson of Rainbow Families Action. Let me put that same question to you, Arnie. You've already kind of alluded to it, answering my questions. Talk about what's your personal motivations for someone that's out here taking direct action, being a part of organizing. This is not your first time on KPFA radio. So, what's your personal motivations to be out here, to be taking actions, whether it's in the street, whether it's calling legislatures, what drives you to do this work?
Well, I've got to start a little bit with my ancestors. I come from a long line of troublemakers and rabble-rousers. My grandfather was nearly killed during the general strike in San Francisco. My grandmother was the earliest organizer, the youngest woman organizer in the Longshoremen's Union in its history. And my father spent the first 8 months of my life in jail as a political prisoner. So I would say that it's in my DNA to see injustice and to be angry about it. But I will say that, this moment has called upon all of those energies of my ancestors as well as my own, because they're coming after my kid. And so I'll just say that I have a legion of ancestors behind me. And I'm really glad that I have a legion of folks that are coming together right now for trans youth, including Jane and the Bay Resistance Organization and immigrants. And I am as worried and as afraid as I get, and as battered as it can feel sometimes to have the relentless attack on our community coming from the federal government. I am equally as inspired and empowered and energized by the way that people have come together in this community to support each other and to fight for each other. And, all you have to do is look at a place like Minnesota, what we've seen there and what we saw here when, the Bay Resistance was crucial to getting them to not even try to invade the Bay Area, that we are ready to stand strong together and we can win. And we already have won. I think the last time I talked to you, we had, managed to fight off Sutter Health from shutting down gender affirming care in their hospitals. We can win, and we have won. And it's a guaranteed loss for them down the line. It's just going to be a matter of how long it takes. They can't win, and we know that already. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take us to get rid of them.
I like those words, Arnie. Great words. That's Arnie Johnson of Rainbow Families Speak Out. And earlier we were hearing the voice of Jane Martin of Bay Resistance. And I feel like the collaboration makes total sense because our communities completely overlap. It's not like there's not any gay or trans immigrants, you know what I mean? So we're all one people, and so the collaboration definitely makes sense. And as you mentioned, Minnesota and other fights throughout the country, we've seen it here. We've seen the Bay Area, this diverse community, all the communities coming together, and as you said, to stop ICE from even getting on the ground and taking a foothold. I know that we have our issues. We're dealing with ICE and kidnappings every day, but we didn't get the huge surge like we saw in Chicago and Minnesota and Los Angeles, thanks to all the hard work and organizing of this very diverse and well-organized community. Well, before I get any last words from you, let me ask how folks can follow what's happening. How can folks keep track of Bay Resistance? Jane, let me throw it to you. Any last words for our listeners, and how can our folks keep up with what the work of Bay Resistance is doing?
Yes, if you're not already subscribed, go to bayresistance.org to sign up to get action alerts from Bay Resistance. And if you look at our latest post about this action we had yesterday, you'll see the petition that you can sign to the governor saying we need to stop this DMV data grab. Encourage everyone to sign that. And to get involved not only in community defense, to defend our communities from these horrific attacks, but we need to come together and build a movement of mass non-cooperation so we can get rid of this regime and stop these kinds of attacks once and for all and win the world that we all deserve to live in. Together.
Definitely. Can you repeat the website one more time?
bayresistance.org.
.org. All right. Well, thank you again. That's the voice of Jane Martin of Bay Resistance. The same to you, Arnie. Any last words for the listeners, and then follow that up with how to keep tabs on Rainbow Families Action.
Yeah, thank you so much, Franklin. We are at rainbowfamiliesaction.org, and you can sign up for our ally newsletter there. We always have actions every week that people can do to support our community, or if you are a parent or caregiver of a trans or non-binary youth, you can sign up there to be a part of our movement. And then the one thing I'll just add to what Jane said about this moment is that the legislators are listening, and they are not sure exactly what to do. When we went up there and lobbied individually with legislators, we heard a lot of questions and a lot of concern and a lot of the looking for guidance. And I think that you as a listenership can be that guidance. If you call your legislator, look up your legislator. If you don't know who they are, call them, tell them you're concerned about this. This is one of those issues where the decision is not made and the opinions are not cut into stone yet. And I think that people can have a huge influence just by calling and telling them that you're watching and that you know and you're paying attention to the decisions they're making, because I think legislators are getting nervous about this, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and hearing that, I feel like I didn't really get an update on where we are. So before I actually let you go, I still have a couple minutes left here. Can Jane or Arnie, I could leave it up to either one of you, tell us where this is at in the legislature. What are they asking? As I understand it from talking to you before we hit the record button here, that it's kind of waiting on funding and they want to approve the funding. So I think I forgot to get that point out earlier. Yeah, so it sounds like Jane here. Jane, like, where are we in this process? What are they actually asking?
So it was included in the Senate budget proposal, but that piece has actually, they haven't moved that forward yet. After we went to Sacramento and spoke out and raised all these concerns, this piece of it did not move forward. So there is still opportunity, as Arnie was saying, and definitely reiterate the call to call your legislators, let them know that you're concerned about this. It'll make a huge difference. So we want to make sure that the funding for this does not get included in the budget, and that they hear loud and strong from all of our Bay Area communities about this.
And
I'll just. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Arnie. I just wanted to clarify that the funding would be to pay the third party to kind of manage the data. Is that what the funding's for?
Exactly. So they want $56 million in order to port that data over to pay for the costs of getting it there and for maintaining it. But written into that budget request are some policy changes that undo the protections of AB 60. So if you're calling your legislator, what you want to ask them is, do not let this go through the budget process. If we are going to make changes to an important policy like AB 60, we need to bring it into the light of day, and someone can make a bill. And if they want to get this data, sent over there, put it through the normal process of amendments and committee hearings and all of that stuff. So our request is simple. It's not, set fire to California. It's just stop this process, have it be real, let it see the light of day, let everyone weigh in.
And then just remind folks, I think you might have said it earlier at the beginning of the show, but what did AB 60 say? What was it?
Yeah, Gene, do you have you want to say something about that?
Just that there was a commitment made when it passed to not to protect the data that was going to be collected. So that's what we're calling on the legislature to uphold.
So they said if you have a driver's license, we will not share this information with immigration authorities. It was a way of getting people to sign up to be have driver's license, so they'd be safer drivers, and we'd be able to keep our roads safe. And as you mentioned earlier, 1 million drivers took that promise to heart, and they are driving safely on our roads because of it. And it would be a pretty awful thing to have lied to them and turn that data over after all.
Yeah, definitely. If you think back to AB 60 now, that we could all remember that it was a big debate that immigrants couldn't have a driver's license, therefore they couldn't get insurance, they couldn't legally drive, and there was accidents and people didn't have insurance, and some folks were like, let's get them a license, they can get insurance. Like you said, they could be more legal and safe drivers, and if there was accidents, insurance can get involved. And that promise was made to protect that data. Well, again, thank you, Arnie Johnson of Rainbow Families Action and Jane Martin of Bay Resistance. You could find more about Bay Resistance, Jane, at bayresistance.org. I believe that was correct.
Yep, that's it.
And Arnie, same with you all, rainbowfamiliesaction.org.
That's it.
All right. Well, I appreciate you both very much. Thanks for being here today. And we wish you luck on this fight, and we look forward to your update that it did not happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Franklin.
Thank you, Arnie, and thank you, Jane. And that brings us to the end of tonight's show. Remember to please like and follow First Voice Media on Facebook, where we post videos and other material that doesn't always make it to the radio. And we're also working on First Voice Media official YouTube. Please check it out. Shout out to the Full Circle crew, Miss M. She's the executive director. Joy Moore is our production consultant. And of course, me, Free Will and Franklin. I have been your host and producer tonight. And I'm also the technical director for this show, Full Circle. Thanks for listening, everyone. And remember, while you're out there, to please protect your health and also your humanity. And stay tuned to KPFA. Up next is La Onda Bajita. Good night, everyone.
Retired professor, author, and former militant, Bill Ayers.
I really am grateful to KPFA, and I want to remind us that in a time when the public is being eclipsed, when the public is under attack, when anything that smacks of the commons is somehow suspect, we should respect and love places like this, and we should respect and love KPFA. Because we need places where we can gather authentically and talk to one another authentically, honestly. To me, the fact that we have this space, the fact that we have each other, there's a lot of talk about what are the guardrails? We're the guardrails, and there are no other guardrails.
Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. We have to make sure that we stay watchful of any attacks, any threats to usurping our right to vote, things that we hold dear, the things that we normally take for granted. We can't be silent. People can't get comfortable being quiet, right? If we cherish our institutions, if we cherish our liberties, cherish the privileges that we have in this country, we have to be vocal. We have to be active. So it's more about what we do in order to protect the things that are important to us.
The duty of the patriot is to protect his country from its government. Thomas Paine. This is 94.1 KPFA and 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, everywhere at kpfa.org.